Welcome, beautiful people of all ages, shapes, and colors, to another episode of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, where we encourage you to stick to the basics. I'm one of your co-hosts, TV, aka TV on Basketball, alongside my co-host, Jay, aka the Knockdown Jay. How's it going, my guy?
It's going good, man. Regular season is kind of getting a little dreadful now. Got a couple, about a week and some change left for the regular season to kind of finally wrap things up.
Well, by the time this episode comes out, we have like 10 days left. We have literally like a week and a half.
Man. It's one of those, man, where we just got to go ahead and get this joker knocked out. NBA playoffs is around the corner. The news around the league has not necessarily been anything to like write home about, but we know that the playoff seeding matters so much that we got to stay tuned in. So I'm still locked into the nighttime games, but I'm so hyped for the playoffs right now, man. I can't lie to you.
100%, bro. I mean, we just got the freaking news that Zach Lowe's back on the pod. The Mind Your Game podcast is like back in place right before the playoffs start. You love to see it, Jay. You absolutely love to see it. So like we're right in the mix of NBA playoff basketball, but before we do that, we have to kind of wrap up the season, Jay. We talked about all defensive teams, all rookie teams last week. Now we're getting to the big hitters, because this week we got all NBA. And that's, we're talking about the best of the best players in the league this year. Going to be a lot of discussion on the 65-game thing, too, so it's going to be really interesting. And, of course, next year we got the NBA award. So we're going to try to wrap up the season as best we can. Today's going to be an awesome episode. Should be a great one for y'all. But before we get into that, we do have to plug our socials. Make sure you follow our individual socials at TV on Basketball, at the Knockdown J. Those links can be found in the description down below. In terms of the Hit Your Free Throws pod, remember to follow us on TikTok and Instagram for the best daily NBA content. We got the picks, news, series, and more. So make sure you check us out over there. Also, if you can check us out on TikTok and Instagram, check out the YouTube Shorts. You can find us there as well. In terms of the YouTube as well, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And hit the notification bell so you won't miss an episode to find all the video format episodes of the show. And if you're on any of the podcast networks, Spotify, Apple, just show your support in any way possible. Subscribe, leave a review, all that good stuff. We appreciate all of you guys' support. Jay, you ready to get into this, man? This is gonna definitely be like one of those episodes where it's like, okay, this is gonna like trying to figure out these All NBA teams is gonna be definitely tough.
Yeah, I mean, we all know the All NBA episode parlayed into the NBA final NBA season awards podcast we do to close out the years, like the perfect bow on a regular season, right? So this is one of those things that takes a good amount of thought. Obviously, have to kind of go crush some numbers. We're breaking down the top 15 players in the league here. You're going to do some nitpicking, right?
100%, yeah.
This takes some time, but I think we got a solid 15.
I will say, I think the first, 5 to 10, who's going to be on the team, right? We kind of already know. It's just when you get to that All-NBA third team and you have to kind of nitpick, do I want this guy on? Do I want this guy off? Is this guy going to make the 65-game threshold and all that? It's going to be interesting, but we're going to go through all of these teams here. We're going to kind of do what we did for the All-Rookie and All-Defensive teams. We're going to give our, All-NBA first team, second team, and third team each, and then we're going to give our thoughts on it afterwards. So, Jay, you ready to give our All-NBA first teams?
Yes, sir.
We should be pretty similar here, but I do think, one position is going to be contentious. And remember, guys, all NBA positionless now. So we don't have to worry about freaking positions at all, which is going to be a lot more fun trying to decide who gets to make it on or not. But Jay, I'm going to throw it over to you. Who makes your all NBA first team?
Okay, so my All-NBA first team, the guys that I thought were kind of auto locks is Jokic and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And then the third one I actually think is an auto lock is also Jason Tatum.
Yes.
My other two, for me, is Giannis Antetokounmpo, who I think was in the top 4 to top 5 in MVP conversation himself for a good majority of the season. And the last pick for me, actually, to round out my top 5 is Donovan Mitchell.
Funnily enough, Jay, we have the exact same 5. I got Jokic, Shai, Tatum, Giannis. I feel like those are the 4 locks for the All-NBA first team right over there. Again, I mean, when it comes to MVP, when we give our con candidates stuff, that might be a little bit different, in terms of the order. But that fifth spot is really contentious. But I do also have Donovan Mitchell, part of the best team in the East. Obviously, his scoring numbers are not like it was back in the Utah days, or even when you look back at last year's Cavaliers, especially because they got a lot of injuries last year and he had to carry a lot of the scoring load. It's different this year, but at the same time, he has increased his efficiency, increased his playmaking numbers, and just become a better all-around player this year for the Cavs, and that's why he kind of sneaks in for me. The rest of the guys, They were just freaking the MVP candidates like throughout most of the season. Like those top four were basically locked up like since it feels like January, February since like those four
Yeah.
guys have always been in the mix. It's just the fifth guy that's always like changing week by week. But I feel like those guys are the locks.
Yeah, I mean, this was the easiest one for obvious reasons, like you said beforehand. You kind of just start with the MVP candidates and kind of bleed out from there. But the way I looked at it specifically for Donovan Mitchell being that fifth guy, for me, it's because of the fact that when you're on a team that's already won 60 games with a few games left to go in the regular seasons,
Yeah.
right? The Cavaliers have played what, 73 games? So they
75.
got
75 games.
75
Yeah.
games?
Yeah, 75. They're
Oh,
60
okay.
and 50. They're 60 and 50 right now. 50.
So they're pretty much, they're coming down the home stretch too, to the point where they have a chance to still win like 65 games before the
Yeah.
season is over. Donovan Mitchell has been a big catalyst to that, obviously. And I think more so the most impressive thing for him, when you compare him to some of the other guys that are going to be brought up mainly for second team, is the difference between him and some of the other guys that might come up is going to be stuff like games played and team success, right? So Cavaliers with the games played part in terms of like what Donovan Mitchell has been able to do, he has not missed significant time with injury.
Yeah.
And then team success, when you look at what they're doing, like they're going to be one of maybe 3 teams across the entire league that win 60 games, because the Boston Celtics have a chance to still win 60 games, and Oklahoma City's already won 63 games by this point. So
Yeah.
like, I mean, you just kind of, you look at that and it's kind of, to me, it would be kind of weird for a Cavalier not to be on first team.
Yeah.
And I also think that, I think Donovan Mitchell has just been a very underappreciated guy specifically this year too.
Yeah, 100%. And like I mentioned, it's just like when you look at like the stats like from like Mitchell from like past years, he just had a lot more of an offensive scoring load. But at the same time, like when you look at last year's team with the Cavaliers, like we were complaining about the fact like Mobley hasn't improved his offensive game. He's kind of stayed stagnant in his career. Darius Garland's having a down year. Like his second best player last year, for the most part, was Jared Allen. If we really do think about it. And then this year, it's the elevation of Evan Mobley, who we might talk about in these All NBA teams. The elevation of Darius Garland, who we might also talk about in these All NBA teams. But he has still stayed that solid guy. And it's like, I mean, 24, 5 and 5 is nothing to scoff at.
Right.
It's just that, like, compared to his, like, previous years where he's averaging, like, 26 points per game, 27, 28, it just kind of seems a bit lower, but he's also just becoming a better, well-rounded player. The turnovers are down, which is great to see with a Donovan Mitchell as well. This is the lowest of his career. Yeah, this is the lowest turnovers of his career, and that just kind of goes to show, like, the onus isn't fully on him. Like, he doesn't have to have the ball in his hands most of the time, and he's still having a very effective season, still staying on the court. I think, like, especially with the way the Cavs, I know, like, team success, player success is definitely, like, team success should not be, like, the determining factor. But with someone who's playing as good as Donovan Mitchell is, I think he does deserve to be on the first team.
Yeah, he was like you said beforehand, he was probably the outlier guy, but I think it was just well deserved. Like, the Cavaliers are going to deserve multiple guys across these All NBA teams,
Yes.
and Donovan Mitchell just seems like the guy who spearheads it all. Which is why he kind of was the dude that I elevated to the first team out of the group of guys we obviously could have pulled from.
Yeah, 100%. And of course, shout out to Jason Tatum. I mean, like, we haven't really talked about it much on the podcast, but he's the number one guy on, like, the second best team in the East, NBA champion. What more needs to be said? And then
Yeah.
Giannis, Jokic, and Shea. I feel like we talked about them all year, all year
Right.
long with these guys. We just know what they're all about. I told you, Dave. All NBA first team. I think that's where the easy stuff is. This is where
Yeah.
we start to get a bit more of a discussion as we go into All NBA second team.
Yeah.
Now, I feel like some of these guys are are definitely locks, but there's some guys like this. This is where we're gonna start to have the discussion. Do you think this, like, a certain player is gonna hit the 65 game mark? Do you think they're gonna be able to even be eligible to make it onto these teams? This is, like, where I feel like the discussion starts. So, All NBA second team, Jay, I'm gonna throw it over to you. Who makes your 5?
So my locks for sure are LeBron James, Evan Mobley,
Yes.
and I want to say that my other lock is Cade Cunningham
Okay.
for me. Now, the two that just like kind of barely make this list, but I do think still should be included on second team, is Jalen Brunson, who will be more. This is where the 65 game threshold thing gets a little interesting with him.
Yeah.
But Jalen Brunson, I would say, is the other one, and then my fifth is Anthony Edwards.
Interesting. Jay, we have 4 of the 5 the same once again. I got
Okay.
LeBron.
Okay.
Cade Cunningham. I'm glad that, Cade Cunningham going from a non-all-star remember, a non-All-Star, one of the worst teams, the longest losing streak in NBA history last year,
Yeah.
making All-NBA second team is one hell of a jump, and he freaking deserves it. I mean, there's a chance where he might be a freaking fifth seed because the Bucks keep falling now that Damian Lillard is out with the blood clot as well. So the Pistons' season might just keep getting better, and Cade being second team is definitely well deserved. I also have Evan Mobley, the second Cav, making it on my list. I also have Anthony Edwards, who make it here. Again, one of those two guys that potentially could be on third team, but I ended up putting him on second team.
Okay.
But Jay, this is where we kind of differ because I am like a bit hesitant if Jalen Brunson is going to make the 65 games. They say he's going to try and be here for the last week of the season, but even still, I don't know if that's going to be enough. I mean, like he might try to make it for like the final 4 games or so, but I still have like I kind of have my doubts. So I actually left him off All NBA overall. And if he does make it,
Okay.
I would say he would make it on the team. I'm just like hesitant to put him on just because I don't think he'll make the 65 game threshold.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is my question. This is my question. If I'm allowed, so am I allowed to give a caveat for who I would slot in his spot if he were to obviously not make 65?
Sure. You know what? I would say, you know what, if he did make it, if he were to, I'm gonna say it later. He is on my he would be on my second team as well if he like would.
Okay, that's what I was gonna ask you.
Yeah.
Like, if he does make it, where would you put him? Because for me, I'm assuming he makes the 65 game threshold. If he does not, my answer is Stephen Curry.
Okay.
But I'm assuming Jalen Brunson will make it just in time.
Sure. I personally don't think he will. That's why I have him off. But the final guy to make it on this list, I'm just gonna put just his teammate. Let me just go with Karl Anthony Towns.
Okay.
I think like, he's having a great like a renaissance here in terms of the offensive, like showcase his offensive skill set. Because you got to remember with Karl Anthony Towns that he played beside Rudy Gobert the last couple of years, and when you have Rudy like occupying that paint space, for like 90% of the game, it's gonna be hard to get like your post touchers, especially with someone as good as Karl Anthony Towns. Now that he has the space, he has played the center position for basically like this entire season. He's shown that he still has the full offensive repertoire, one of the best offensive bigs in the league, and he's done it. I mean, he's already crossed 65 game threshold. This next team is doing really well with him. I would have him starting in there. You would have Steph Curry. I think like eventually both of these guys are going to be like on any of our teams, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, there are 2 guys that are going to be on my third team. Just to kind of like give a spoiler to that one. Again, Jalen Brunson. He's played 61 games, so he has a good enough amount of room where if he just comes back, like you said, that last week of the season, that should be just enough to put him over the top. I think it's one of those situations where it would be in his best interest to come back before the postseason starts. Well, so everything storyline wise to me says he's gonna at least be able to get those last 4 games in there. But like I said, that's with the caveat that he does make it. If he doesn't, and I just said, hey, I'm not as confident. My name I would have replaced him with was Steph.
Fair enough. But talking about these other guys here, I mean, like Evan Mobley. We talk about the freaking like jump of Cade Cunningham making it. Evan Mobley was like we were having conversations in the offseason about him like not like taking the jump, staying stale. We knew that he was one of the best defenders in the league. That wasn't like any question on our minds that he was one of the best especially like big defenders in the league. But becoming a defensive player of the year favorite at this point, upping his offensive game, being on a 61 team, like what does this mean for him going into the playoffs? But also just like him as like his like look inside the league as like one of the best players like in the NBA.
So his development is kind of leaning more towards the archetypes that he was compared to coming out of the draft, which is more towards that Tim Duncan-y, Chris Bosh combinational type, right? Like the fact that he's been shooting the ball so well from beyond the arc since like around the beginning of the new year, right?
Yeah.
If you date back even to like December-ish, he's been shooting 38%
or something like that, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And for him on 3.5 attempts or so is actually a really good starting point because at one point he really wasn't pulling the trigger at all from beyond the arc. And that was one of the most interesting facets of his game coming out of USC was that there was this ability to put the ball on the floor and stretch the floor as a shooter that he kind of wasn't tapping into his first couple of seasons with the Cavaliers. He felt more like a defensive specialist at the center position / power forward position. Almost felt like he was kind of out of place on the floor on offense to the point that it felt like he kind of overcompensated defensively in order to make up for the fact that he wasn't really a threat offensively outside of putbacks and like, dump offs and
Sure.
dunk
Yeah.
spot stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I think the biggest thing for him is the ability to step out from to the 3-point line, but also I think another thing, I think we talked about this a long time ago when we were first talking about Kenny Atkinson's impact on Evan Mobley this season. He's putting the ball on the floor and driving more.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the part that I love
Yeah.
to see from him, is the fact that we know what Darius Garland is capable of. We know what Donovan Mitchell is capable of when it comes to offense in terms of initiating offensive sets, right? But the thing that I like the most is that Evan Mobley has become more confident when he grabs a rebound, putting the ball on the floor, taking it up the floor, and making good decisions, like making quick decisions, making good reads, being more aggressive. I think the biggest thing from a playoff implication standpoint when you talk about Evan Mobley is his aggression as a third option offensively opens up the court significantly for the Cavaliers against any team they face, where now you have to be more mindful of him as a scoring threat, because we know what Donovan and Darius are capable of, but now you have to pay Evan Mobley a certain level of offensive respect that takes a lot of the onus off of those two guys, where it's a player pick your poison now. And that's something they didn't have the availability of last season or even the season prior. And that's kind of what got them punked.
Yes. I mean, this whole offensive change has been great. Like, the amount of times I've seen him grab the rebound and just run the fast break himself. I've seen it, like, with, like, so many different guys on the Cavs where they just have the ability, like, oh, Jared out, like, Evan Mobley gets the rebound, you start the fast break. DeAndre Hunter, you get the rebound, you start the fast break. Whoever gets it gets to start the fast break, and everyone just starts running their lanes. Everyone has just become so comfortable at that. You have Evan Mobley, like, working off, like, in the mid-post area, which is, like, something rare we get to see. And we've seen in his past playoff performances, like, he just seemed very timid on the offensive end. In his first, like, playoff appearance, he was averaging, like, under 10 points a game, which is crazy to think about for an Evan Mobley, like, caliber player. But now that he's got these reps in the regular season against a team where, like, especially against a team, I hate to say this to you, Jay, but if it's like against the Chicago Bulls or
No, I agree.
against the Orlando Magic, it just gives them, like, more time to, like, kind of like fill himself in the playoffs and just be more comfortable when it's time to face, like, the Pacers of the world, potentially, if he has to face, like, the Celtics and all that. So you're going to need this version of Evan Mobley, because Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell are going to be freaking getting picked on defensively a lot throughout a lot of these series. So if you can have them exert their energy, like, on the defensive end while you have, like, Evan Mobley, like, contributing on the offensive end, that would be fantastic. But yeah, shout out to him. He definitely deserves love on the second team. Another guy, just quickly before we ended up going on the third team, man, LeBron James is in freaking year 22, and he's like, I was trying to make the argument potentially that he was going to be All-NBA first team over Donovan Mitchell. Yeah. If it wasn't for the record, like, there was, like, a true argument there, Jay.
No, you're definitely right. The record is one of the bigger discrepancies. I also think that if you have to look at games played versus Donovan Mitchell between LeBron James, that discrepancy as well kind of opened it up, where you're like, okay, I have to be a little bit more fair to the guy with the best record in the Eastern Conference, paired with the fact that he's been one of the most significant contributors in the East in terms of title contending teams anyway, right? So the biggest thing for me with LeBron James is he was that close to being a guy that that was going to be able to kind of fall into that fifth spot. But the groin injury thing kind of took the games played thing to more of like he's going to make it, but I don't necessarily know if I can compare him to someone like Donovan. But the fact he's averaging 25, 8, and 8 and shooting the three ball at a good clip this year is just, like, I think pretty insane. I think the biggest thing to me, too, is that he's adapted more to this off-ball role in a way that I think everybody's always theorized, but it took a player like Luka Doncic, particularly being on this team, and the empowerment of Austin Reeves this season for LeBron to really fall in line with a more active off-ball game, to the point that I saw a stat earlier today that said LeBron is shooting, like 45% on catch and shoot three balls? Like, if he's going to be doing stuff like that, I mean, come on now.
Right. Like, the thing about LeBron, and this is what I love about, like, the Mind the Game podcast, because we get to go back inside the mind of LeBron. I'm going to quote something that he said here, where it's like, he understands that Luka's the quarterback now. And he's like, and when I tell you, this man was glowing when he was talking about Luka Doncic being on the team. When he talked about the surgence of Austin Reeves. Man was like, man, I don't have to do everything now.
Right.
I can rely on Luka Doncic, Austin Reeves has come into his own, so they can even like we've seen them I mean we look back to the Bulls game, man. Who took the freaking last shot for the Lakers in that one? Austin Reeves. Who won him the
Right.
game on Christmas Day? Austin Reeves. Like they've become so comfortable with him as a third option. Him being one of the best third options in the league at this point. I don't want to like discredit Austin Reeves at all because he has had a fantastic year as a member of the Lakers. But
Mhm.
LeBron has taken a step back, focused more on his off-ball play, which is something that we were very skeptical of when the Luka Doncic trade happened. But he's shown he loves doing that. I mean, like, what's there to say? He's one of the smartest players in the league. He knows the spots on the court that he needs to be in, like Luka's eyesight in order to get the best shot possible. He's improving the three ball. He's making cuts. It just shows that LeBron has just so many layers to this game, and like even in year 22, he's gonna have a chance. Look, if he makes All NBA first team, that's ridiculous. But 14 All NBA first teams, that's the most in NBA history. But
Yeah.
even making it here, that's gonna be like I think like the total. I think this is gonna be his 21st All NBA selection. Just insane to see at his age.
I think the biggest thing too is his rejuvenated energy within this Lakers roster has permeated through the entire team in a way that like they've improved significantly since the new year began in a way that they've handled the things we were the most worried about for this team as well, especially after the Luka Doncic trade.
Yeah.
Like TV, for example, the fact that they've been like number 3 in defense since the new year turned over is like insane to me.
Yes.
Right? That's all about effort more than anything, right? Because personnel wise, we thought this team was cooked defensively. Well, especially after the Luka Doncic trade, we thought, dang, you ain't really got no centers outside of Jackson Hayes. Like
Yeah.
defensively on the perimeter, Vando is coming off an injury. Like we're looking at everything and we're like, personnel wise, defense does not look like the thing that's going to get them through. The fact that they've been a top 5 defense since the new year turned over, paired with the fact that Luka Doncic is catching his footing over the last couple of months, paired with LeBron James having a lot more energy on that side of the floor, Austin Reeves being further empowered as an offensive option, specifically in the clutch more than anything.
Yes.
That's one of those situations where I feel like you look at this team and the Lakers, obviously you can't call the Lakers sleeping giants because everybody's going to favor them within a given series, just given the fact that, like, first of all, they're LA, but second of all, that they have Luka
Luka
Doncic
Doncic
and
and
LeBron,
LeBron
and
James. Yeah.
that's always going to feel like a good bet. So they're not a sleeping giant, but they're a team that's much better than what their seeding is going to respectfully represent for them. And that's going to be huge because the Lakers only need a certain kind of pathway to kind of game wreck this whole bracket for real.
100%. And like, I'm just glad to see it because again, like we've seen how good LeBron is this year. We've seen like how good Luka Doncic is, and they are playoff phasers. So like once they go into the playoffs, you know they're gonna take it to the next gear. They've shown it every time they've been in the postseason setting. I'm just super excited to see what they're able to do. Just like quickly again, just shout out to Kate Cunningham. Just like how good he's been. I have a feeling we're gonna talk about him more next week when it comes to the NBA awards because there's an award that is
Yeah, right.
perfectly lined up for him. So we're gonna give him more time there. And then again, Cat for me, Jalen Brunson for you. Jay, it's time to move on to the All NBA third team, and this is the one where it's like, okay, we've gone through the best of the best in the league. There's a lot of guys here who are candidates for the third team, Jay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys. I had like a short list of like 9 different players that could potentially be here. And you can make a good argument for all of these, and I would not hate them if you put it in. But I have my 5 here, Jay. I'm going to throw it over to you. Who do you have as your 5 for the All NBA third team?
Yeah, so Anthony Edwards almost slipped down here. I just think that Anthony
Yeah.
Edwards has been the only real pulse consistently for the Minnesota Timberwolves this
Yeah,
season.
we didn't really talk about him in the last one, but yeah, he's still damn good.
Part of the reason we haven't talked about part of the reason we didn't talk about Anthony Edwards is really because of the fact that, like, go look at that team and ask me who you think has been their most productive player. And I understand the easy answer would be Anthony Edwards just because he's their best player, but particularly this season with Dante DiVincenzo being picked up in the offseason, paired with Julius Randle, Rudy Gobert having a more extended role because of the fact that they no longer have Karl Anthony Towns as a post player, right? Their team was built to play more within a depth position than being super reliant on just Anthony Edwards. No, instead, Anthony Edwards being the mainstay is probably the only reason the Timberwolves have been relevant this year.
Yeah.
Now, pair that with the fact that Julius Randle post-injury has really picked up his game.
Yeah.
right? But Anthony Edwards has been the only mainstay. So he almost fell to my third team.
Yeah, and also shout out to him, like, just improving his 3-point shot. Like, his 3-point shot is, like, a big revelation this year.
Significantly, right? Yeah.
Significant rise. I think he's still, like, number one in the league in, like, 3-pointers made, or, like near the top of the league.
I wouldn't be surprised. His volume is still insane to the point that I think he was taking 14 or 15 per 36. So
Yeah, no,
like,
I'll double check as you're talking, but, like, yeah.
yeah,
But, like,
he's been bugging out almost all year from beyond the arc. Shout out to him for actually expanding that part of his game. I think that's very important.
number two. He's number two.
Oh, he's
He's
number
number
two.
two next
Okay.
to Malik Beasley's number one. Yeah.
Well, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
that makes sense too.
That makes
Yeah.
sense. But yeah, I think that's huge though that he's in that space because I understand that he's a good above the rim player and he's always going to be elite around the rim as a finisher, right?
Yeah.
But his ability to stretch the floor, him stepping into that role. See, when I first saw him start to get that uptick to double-digit 3-point attempts per game, I was worried because I thought maybe he was overcompensating. I thought maybe he was
Yeah.
adapting too much to the idea of no longer having Karl Anthony Towns. What I didn't consider until maybe a couple of months further into the season was the idea that adaptation was less of him overcompensating and more of him trying to fill a role that now opens up a further development across the rest of his roster with guys
Yeah.
like Dante DiVincenzo being able to spray,
Yeah.
with guys like Nas Reed being able to spray, with guys like Julius Randle having more space inside the mid-range area to operate now that Anthony Edwards has stepped further away from the basket. So that's one of those things where I think actually instead of him coming off as overcompensating, he's actually adapted to his team's makeup in a way that makes them work better. And I think that should gain a lot of credit on its own because that's a player who you can see in 4K developing his game in front of our very eyes in a way that actually works, not just necessarily is just him kind of adding something for the sake of having it in his bag.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, I was literally in the same boat as you, but now it's like seeing how the Timberwolves play now. Like he fits like right in, and it's working out, especially in the second half of the season for sure. But yeah, we got sidetracked just because like we didn't really mention Anthony.
Yeah, right.
One. But yeah, he was on our second team. Third team, Jay, who do you have?
So third team, my locks, Steph Curry, who I told you could have been second team for me. Karl Anthony Towns, who you said was on your second team, I think very fairly. He's a guy who was floating with all NBA first team earlier on.
Yeah. Especially with how good the Knicks were playing. Like, yeah, he was definitely going there.
Earlier on in the league year, Karl Anthony Towns was staring at like first team All NBA, maybe even second team All NBA at his worst. Things have significantly calmed down since then. So I have him down at third because I couldn't take him off the list completely. And my third lock was Jaren Jackson Jr. And that's because it's between him and Evan Mobley for DPOY. I think we both know who our DPOY winner is, but Jaren Jackson Jr. is he's been in that top 3 conversation even dating back to when Wemby was the front runner.
Yes.
So he's my third lock. Now my last 2, I have to keep Kevin Durant on this list, productivity-wise, personally.
Okay.
And my last one, I raved about it multiple times on the podcast. You can't play all 5 positions and me not put you on all third team. I got to put Jalen Williams on the third team, bro. You can't play all 5 positions, fill in for all 3 of your centers being injured throughout the beginning of the first portion of the league year, and I not consider you as an all-NBA caliber player, especially when I think about it when I say the Cavaliers got 2 all-NBA players with the best record of the Eastern Conference. The Oklahoma City Thunder have a better record than them in the Western Conference, and Jalen Williams has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, 100%. And don't worry, Jay, he's on my third team as well. Don't worry. So
great.
Don't worry. I got J Dub on my third team. I also got Steph Curry. So of course that was going to be a lot for me. Jaren Jackson Jr. was there.
Okay.
Now these last 2 positions. Again, I told you Jalen Brunson didn't make mine, unfortunately, just because I don't think he'll make the 65. Jay, I'm kind of worried about the Suns and like Kevin Durant making it, mostly because their season is like continuing to fall apart. And if they ever do like get to that point where they're like eliminated, like is there really a point for him to play the final 2 games and like risk himself getting injured? So like, Jay, I know the productivity is there. I just don't know like with the way the season's going. I don't know if like KD will meet it. I just don't. There's a chance where he just might like.
I don't know, man. 27 points on 50, 40, 90 is kind of nuts, though, bro. Like, it's just like from an individual productivity
Fine,
standpoint,
fine. Yeah, you know.
this is how I'll put it. Hey, clip this, brother.
Yeah.
This is how I'm going to put this.
Yes.
The Suns might be a shit show, but Kevin Durant's 50, 40, 90, it can be placed on any roster and would be elevated within any other roster. I know the Suns are bad, but Kevin Durant as an individual talent is always going to be considered an all NBA caliber player
Yeah.
until proven otherwise, brother.
You know what? Fine. You know
Like,
that I'll put him on. I'll put him on. I was just
you're
like kind of
mid-30s, 50,
fine,
40,
fine,
90
yeah.
on a Suns team that really is kind of tanking because of stuff that ain't got nothing to do with KD, bro.
Fine. I honestly, the only reason I was like more hesitant was like, man, like these guys are gonna freaking fall into not even a play-in spot, and I'm just like, you know what? I'll keep him in there. You know what? He's been great. I'm gonna like I can't take anything away from KD. He has still been that absolute monster as he's been every single year. Even if he
Yeah.
just like makes it in, I'll keep him on the thing. I will say I am removing Darius Garland from this. Then if like I was gonna put Darius Garland as like one of my last members of All NBA 13, but I'm gonna remove him forward to Kevin Durant. Shout out to the Cavs though. Again, they're still the number one team in the East. And Jay, my last guy here. I know this is. I mean, I don't have Jalen Brunson making it. KD ends up getting in, but my final spot for All NBA third team, I'm gonna shout out the freaking Rockets, and I'm gonna slide Alperen Şengün as the final spot on the third team.
Okay. I'm not mad at it. I'm actually not mad at it.
Man, like I'm gonna start with Şengün because he was on my team and he wasn't on yours. But like, if you look at freaking March, like me, like especially like end of February, beginning of March, Şengün was like an absolute monster. And I know like his like 3-point shot has gone down. That's not always his role, but they're using him as the freaking hub of the offense. You have a bunch of defenders around him making up for the fact that he's not a great like interior defender. Then you have a perimeter guy in Jalen Green. Like we thought that the Rockets, like we saw them like go on to like 7 or 8 game losing streak, and we're like, oh man, they might even just fall back to the play-in. Nah, they got Alperen Şengün going. They got Jalen Green actually like playing well for like over half the season. I know we were complaining about him, like especially in the early parts, but I will say for like more than half the season, he has been a pretty damn good second option. But the guy leading the team is Alperen Şengün. He is their offensive hub. And as good as the defense is for the Houston Rockets, this offense is led by Alp, and being the second best team in the Western Conference, they're probably going to win like 52, 53 games.
Yeah.
I honestly, it doesn't feel right not having one guy from that team, and Alp is going to be that guy for me.
No, I think that's totally fair. And I think the one thing that people don't mention about the Rockets is from a learning curve perspective, the best thing that could have happened to the Rockets this season isn't finishing as a top 3 seed in the Western Conference. It's identifying that Alp truly is a player you can centralize as an offensive hub long term.
Yes.
That's if you didn't learn anything about this Houston Rocket team between the beginning of the year going into the new year, we're talking about when they kind of like really picked things up around January, when things slowed down a little bit. Now we're going into April, basketball starting to slow down and we're getting into postseason form. If there's anything we learned about the Houston Rockets this year that's most important, it's the fact that now we understand that Alperen Şengün can be trusted as an offensive hub on a team that plays high-level basketball. See, the difference is, I think me and you, we even talked about this on the podcast last year. I think me and you both identified Alperen Şengün as easily being the number one option for the Houston Rockets dating back to last season.
Yes.
The difference is that we weren't fully understanding of whether or not the Houston Rockets were for real as a team in the Western Conference. And that made it where you can be an elite level player as an offensive engine, but if you're on a team that's always going to finish between 11 and 14, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
Now you fall into the old Phoenix Suns with Devin Booker. You fall into the Bradley Beal with Washington, with the Washington Wizards post John Wall, right? You fall into that category, LaMelo Ball with the Charlotte Hornets right now. You fall into that category of being a guy who can be trusted with the ball in your hands to create offense for your team, but does it lead to winning basketball, right? We had this conversation about Cade Cunningham before this year with the Detroit Pistons. We can honestly say that, right?
Yeah.
I think that jump that Alp has made offensively, paired with the Houston Rockets building a defensive infrastructure around him with guys like with Amen, with Tari Eason, with Dylan Brooks, with Fred
Van Vliet,
VanVleet,
right?
right?
Yeah.
You position yourself now to be able to play quality basketball with a guy in the middle of it who just knows how to make good decisions with the ball, both as a scorer and as a facilitator. LP is going to elevate. I think by next season, if he hasn't already, LP is going to elevate into that conversation where we're comparing him in a way where maybe we view him as higher than Domantas Sabonis. And I think some
Yes.
people are already on that train, but I think that by next season, if you weren't already in that camp, I think a lot of people are going to slowly lean towards LP being a more valuable offensive center than Domantas Sabonis is. And that's going to show you the difference between how good the Houston Rockets have been versus how good we still think they can get to.
Yeah, 100. I'm like completely on board with that, man. Like, I mean, like again, we were worried about him, like especially like how he would like fit like on like a really good team. His scoring has dipped a little bit, but at the same time, like the Rockets are top half of the league in offense, so that's still an above average offense in the NBA. And
Right.
then you got like them being the second seed, Alp not being like completely targeted every single game. Like
Right.
he hasn't been like played off the floor a bunch. I mean, like there were times early in the season where you're kind of worried about that, but they've become a lot more comfortable with him ending games. But yeah, no, he deserves like I feel like especially like on how good the Rockets have been. Again, team success isn't like the 100% determining factor, but Schengen has put up the numbers. He's been that good where he definitely deserves third team love. Jaren Jackson Jr. We'll probably talk about him more next week in terms of his
Yeah.
role there. Steph Curry, is there anything else to say about him? Like he's like even like what people consider like a down year. I won't even consider it a down year, but he's still like one of the best players in the league. So
I feel like with Steph Curry, it's kind of the similar conversation that we were having about LeBron James. It's one of those things where, like, after the reinvigoration from the newly installed Jimmy Butler onto the roster,
okay.
it just has created a new vibe for him where he's just played much better. Like, I
Yes.
think that getting Jimmy Butler and understanding, like, okay, no, we really have a shot now. Like, we genuinely have a
Yeah, I
chance
think yeah,
to
for
be
sure.
a danger in the Western Conference. That has given him a new rejuvenation to the point that you can see him playing with just a lot more swag than we've seen him play throughout the beginning portion of the year. And Steph Curry is always going to be one of those players that you have to be careful for the entire 94 feet, right?
Yeah.
But the post All-Star break in particular has just unlocked a certain level of freedom from him that's similar to LeBron James, I think has showed in his play where you're just like, okay, going into the postseason, he's coming in on that mode. And that's a completely different feeling than I think what we had even coming into the regular season with the Warriors, where like we felt like the Warriors were good enough to be a postseason team. But did you think they were dangerous enough to really be a threat in the Western Conference? I think a lot of us thought this was gonna be the last hurrah. A lot of us thought that the letting Klay Thompson walk move was going to be considered the beginning of the end, right?
Yes.
And instead, this Jimmy Butler trade has extended life in this Warriors franchise in a way that I think superstars like Draymond Green and Steph Curry are starting to feel, and you can see it in their play on the floor.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you on that. Like that middle part of the season was tough because you got to remember that the Warriors started like what 15-3 or something like that to start off the
Yeah.
year, something crazy, and he was going crazy. That middle part was like really sketchy, especially to the point where they're like, oh, maybe he doesn't even deserve to be an All-Star starter this year. But he's picked it back up. I know he's coming off a groin injury right now, so he's kind of struggling a bit, but he definitely looks a lot more energized with the Jimmy Butler addition. So yeah, Steph Curry. I mean, just like KD, just like LeBron, he's been just a staple here. So even a sort of down year for Steph Curry is still better than like a lot of these guys like best season. So you gotta shout out Steph Curry there. We talked about KD. You convinced me to have him to kind of to keep him on the All NBA third team for me, and then of course Jalen Williams. We talked about him last year in terms of all defensive team man, but 25-5, best record in the league. Man had to like cover for so many people this year, and he has done a stellar job. I just watched that freaking Bulls game, and this man was like got 2 blocks on the same possession. This guy's
Yeah.
everywhere on the court. He's knocking down threes. He's like the freaking perfect Robin to Shay's Batman right now.
Yeah, Jalen Williams is he's fully put together, man. I think he's starting to understand the Scottie Pippen role in a real way where his versatility opens up so much for this Oklahoma City Thunder team. And I think the most dangerous thing that people don't talk about enough is that this Thunder team is coming off of a postseason where they got a lot of heartbreak from that
Yes.
Dallas series. And that's something that they were able to experience early and often with the fact that their roster is this young. So the fact that they were able to not only push that series to 6 games, but also position themselves in a real way to get that heartbreak and get it early. They now have the experience paired with the fact that they're just so well built and constructed from a play style perspective that now you have somebody like Jalen Williams who understands the importance of him embracing a real secondary role as an offensive option more specifically. And I think the other thing too is this Oklahoma City Thunder team is so dangerous going into the postseason because TV, like, we've never seen them play a full 48 minutes of like real like high level basketball. Like you only see it in spurts, like when they face the Denver Nuggets or like a couple of games against the Boston Celtics here and there. But like this team is so used to blowing folks out that like the minutes per game for this team across the board is pretty well distributed for the most part.
Yeah, no,
And
Shay's
that
only at
makes
like
it
34. Like J
yeah,
Dub is only at 32, and everyone else is under 30. That firstly shows the depth of the Thunder. Also,
exactly.
also shows that a lot of guys were in and out of the lineup. So you got some
Yeah,
guys like they're getting like a lot more minutes. But yeah, no, these guys are not like 35 plus, like having to play a lot of clutch games because
right.
this team is damn good.
Yeah, this team is just very damn good, and the Oklahoma City Thunder have positioned themselves to be one of the most well-rested teams going into the postseason. Not only because they're youthful, but also because they're just so used to getting out and ahead. I mean, I saw a stat graphic, right, that said that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander leads all players in the league in total points scored, right? Second behind him is Anthony Edwards, right?
Yeah.
But as a part of that stat graphic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's points through the first 3 quarters would still make him the third highest scorer in the entire league in terms of total points.
I mean, that
That's
tells you, yeah,
insane
that's
to
insane.
me.
Yeah, that's insane.
Through 3 quarters, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander would still be a top 3 scorer in the entire league. If that doesn't show you not only how lethal he is, but how much credit you have to give to the Oklahoma City Thunder organization for having the kind of depth and talent to be able to like finish teams off so early and give him that kind of rest. That's a credit to both him and the organization to understand. Get these teams out early, sit your guys, position yourselves to be well rested, and still be one of the best teams in the regular season. But also realize what the bigger goal is.
Yeah, no, for sure. I I'm just so excited to see this team come to playoff time and see if this. I mean, we've seen them just dominate the regular season for the past 2 years. Last year we saw glimpses of what they could do, but they ran into the Dallas Mavericks. Sorry, not the Dallas Mavericks. They ran into the freaking yeah, the Dallas Mavericks where they were just going on some crazy run. So now that they're like solidified as the best team in the league, and now that they with the additions of Ihart and Caruso, it's excited to see. But having two All NBA players in SGA and J Dub absolutely like putting on a show every single night has been an absolute joy, and that's why they're both on our list.
Yeah.
Jay, before we move on though, I do want to say, like, who are some guys that you kind of had to omit, some guys that maybe some people might be considered snubs that you were thinking of putting on, but ultimately did not have on your All NBA teams?
So some of my snubs, they were kind of easy ones. So one that you mentioned was Alperen Sengun. That felt like a layup. Another one that felt like an interesting one to put on the list was Pascal Siakam for the Indiana Pacers. I
Yes.
thought that he was well deserving as well. Um, you can make an argument for Domantas Sabonis to a certain extent. I think that he was an interesting name to come up. Damian
Harden?
Lillard,
Harden?
Damian
Yeah.
Lillard was another one. Just
Yeah.
because games played, he's not going to be able to make it. But Dame had the capability to be on All NBA third team. Honestly, had he kind of crossed the threshold. And maybe my last one would be like James Harden, maybe just with how
Yeah.
productive he's been for the LA Clippers, who have clearly like outplayed expectations this year,
Yeah.
significantly outplayed expectations, honestly. Remember, we have to go back to the fact that we were joking in the beginning of the year, like, yo, there's a universe where the Clippers could mess around and accidentally give the Oklahoma City Thunder Cooper flag, right? So
Yeah.
that's where the Clippers are coming from. So I think James Harden is another player that's definitely openly deserving
Yeah.
of at least being in the conversation. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I think that's and then JB Jalen Brown for the Celtics. That would probably be like my sixth.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like we have very similar guys. I was really thinking of Jalen Brunson again was just at the edge. I just don't think he'll like could reach a 65 game threshold, especially with the significance of his injury.
Yeah,
Harden was on my short list. You know how much I was rooting for him, especially during the All Star break, and he's been
yeah.
like just continuing to do good all season long. Siakam show some like former Raptors some love. Um, I wish this man was like on a better team, but Trey Young like deserves like a little bit of love here.
Yeah, he's one
Mm.
of those that I think Trey Young, the part that he gets kind of smacked in the mix of it all is just because his team is just not good and they're slowly falling out of the contention for like even being considered as like obviously they're going to be in the play-in. That's locked
Yeah.
in pretty much, right?
They're
Just given
seventh
the
right
fact
now,
that
which is really weird to say, but they're
yeah,
seventh.
like
Yeah.
just given the fact that the play-in situation is just as nasty as it is, they're pretty much locked into that grouping. But like we don't see them as really being on nothing, right? Especially with the
Yeah.
injuries to Jalen Johnson and the trading of DeAndre Hunter in particular. So
Yeah.
he's just hurt by circumstances more than anything, which is unfortunate because he's definitely been All NBA worthy.
Yeah, no, for sure. The other guy I just wanted to shout out again, someone who I had on my team, like on the edge with Katie, but I removed Darius Garland. The,
Yeah,
the bounce back season has been absolutely fantastic for him. Crazy efficiency for a point guard, by the way. 47% from the field, 40% from three, 80% from the line, 60% true shooting for a freaking point guard. Absolutely
no,
ridiculous from Darius
no.
Garland, who's averaging 20, basically 21, 7, and 3. Like, he definitely deserves some love. Honestly, if he makes it and if Katie doesn't end up making the the games requirement, I wouldn't mind him being put there. But if there's anyone else you guys want us to see on these teams, let us know down below. I want to hear your guys' thoughts. And if there's anyone else that we didn't even mention on our snubs list and you think that deserves more love, let us know down below as well. Jay, we're gonna move on to the next topic. And we teased this a bit last week when we talked about the NBA having a problem in terms of, we talked about the media problem a lot. But another thing that's going on right now, Jay, is the tanking problem. And I feel like we talk about this almost every single year. But Jay, man, it's really bad this year. This is like this like tanking battle at the bottom. I will say from like number one to like number, let's see, at 7. He had number 1 to number 7, like the top odds of the draft. Yo, each of these teams are just trying to outbat each other, bro. I will say that my Raptors are kind of like breaking away from that mold. Like we're still starting like some guys here and there, and we're giving them good minutes. But bro, have you seen like some of these lineups these guys are putting out recently? It's
I
ugly.
mean, we had the conversation most recently about your team in particular, right? Doing a little bit of finesse finagling, but also the Utah Jazz in particular have gotten real nasty with their lineup construction as well. I think the biggest thing for me, bro, is just the fact that the tanking situation is going to hurt the play-in tournament concept. Remember, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, you made a joke as part of our At the Buzzer segment that like maybe they just need to like completely scrap
Eastern Conference,
the
yeah.
Eastern Conference play-in tournament, right? And it's because of the fact that it's like no matter how you look at it, you can't take it seriously.
Yeah.
Not only do we not even know who really is trying to make the 7 and 8 seed for the Eastern Conference, but even worse, we know whoever comes into it is getting smacked by Boston and getting smacked by Cleveland first round. The question is just how many games?
Right, 100%. And this is kind of having a problem with like a lot of the teams here. Like, we just freaking faced the 76ers the other day, and Jay, just like seeing, like, I know that they have injuries, I understand that, but like, we're putting names to injuries now that, like, let's be honest, these guys can play. Like, you look at some guys like Tyrese Maxey has been gone for like a month and a half with some like nagging injury. He probably had he probably could have played at some point. They rested like their top 9 rotation guys. Like it's rough. I'm saying that right now, it's a rough time if you're in the bottom of the standings, especially while watching basketball. But we're gonna look at this article, Jay, from the Score, and they talk about ways to kind of combat tanking in a sense where um try to like have some sort of solution so people are not trying to chase those top odds all the time, being able to maybe like get some sort of like other methods to kind of like stop tanking. So I'm gonna show you some odds. Tell me like your thoughts on them. First one that they say here in the article is try to flatten the odds even more. Jay, you remember the days when they used to be 25% for the first pick, 19 and like I think it was like 14% for the top 3 picks. Jay, this new format that the score has, the top five odds have all 10%, and then everything now ranges from 9.5 all the way down to 3. So like the highest odds you can get for number one pick is a 10%. Lowest you can get is 3. So it's very much like not a crazy difference. Maybe the floor is gonna be interesting, but how do you feel about that?
I think that would be the best way for even distribution. I just think at the end of the day, with the flattening of the odds too significantly, it's like, I don't know. That just makes it so tricky when you're talking about where teams are slotted in all of that, though, right? So if the lottery odds are flattened, like how are you gonna go like how I don't know.
No. My issue with this, and like in concept is fine, but you gotta think of like like how your Bulls were like the 9th and 10th seed for the longest time or something like that.
Yeah.
Like it gives them more incentive to tank if you think about it, because like since the odds are now flattened, like oh that means we just need to be like in like the bottom 8 or the bottom 9, and we still get like just as good of a chance as everyone else.
I think that's what I'm trying to say. Like my issue is that it doesn't feel like it moved the needle too much in terms of how teams finish.
Yeah. I feel like this will, if anything, this is going to affect the play-in more, in my opinion.
Right.
This is gonna
Exactly.
that's the issue I find out with like the flattening of the odds. Like, it just incentivizes like the play-in teams. Maybe not the bottom end teams. Like the bottom end teams are gonna get freaking screwed. Let's be completely honest. With these new odds, they get screwed. But it just incentivizes like the guys that you want to be competitive. The guys that you want to get a chance to do it and be like, oh, if we lose a couple games here, we could potentially get into like the 9th best odds. And there's only like a 5% difference from the first odds. So we'll live with the results. Like that's not what you want to have. That's not what you have. So
right.
Like I like the concept. At the same time, I think like it's gonna badly affect the teams that you want to be competitive. All right, next one, Jay. Removing the floor. So like how in draft picks we're like, oh, if you have the best odds in the thing, the highest you can get is number 1, the lowest you can get is number 5.
Yeah.
What if everyone has 1 to 14? So even the worst team in the league has a chance at the 14. Very minimal. We'll say very minimal odds, but like they have a chance to get down low.
Now, I'm not gonna lie, as a Bulls fan, I would freaking hate this. And the reason why I say that is because think about how many times the Bulls have fell between 7 and fell like actually not between 7. Think about how many times the Bulls fell to the 7th overall pick just based off of their odds, right? Yeah. Now imagine opening that up even worse, where you're potentially able to fall to as far as 14 if things don't play in your favor. Man, I would hate that as a team. Like I said, for a team like mine, for the Chicago Bulls, who, by the way, the Chicago Bulls, if they do, well, there will be a lottery team. I just based off how everything will break down. But the Bulls, me, in my personal opinion, if we're going to break tanking, you have to reward teams like the Bulls who are deciding to play this joker out. They are deciding to play this joker out for real. San Antonio, they took De'Aaron Fox out because of a pinky injury. The New Orleans Pelicans just announced the other day, or it might have even been earlier today, that Zion Williamson and CJ McCollum are not going to be playing for the remainder of the regular season due to their respective injuries. Right?
Yes.
The Utah Jazz, foolishness on the floor. Don't even know what's going on with that situation in terms of what they're putting out on the night.
The Philadelphia 76ers are putting on like a generational tank right now.
Philadelphia 76ers accidentally called Sam Hinkie in for a week and a half and just decided to just tee off for the last week and a half to 2 weeks.
Yeah.
They've been tweaking. The Chicago Bulls are the representation of the type of team that if you're going to be bad, you're going to be bad, but you're bad enough to be in the lottery, but good enough to still be at least considered as a team that, is going to be building something, they are the type of team that you reward with a Cooper flag. I'm obviously playing a homer role by being a Chicago Bulls fan, but I'm just saying, if you go down the NBA standings right now and you look at the teams and you ask yourself, who is the most deserving team of these quote unquote low back teams at the bottom of the East and the Western Conference, I would say that the Wizards deserve it because we just understand that they're young and that they're not necessarily good because they're playing under a youth movement. I would say the Hornets deserve it because they are young and they've been dealing with injuries, mainly the one to Brandon Miller. His season being ended, so early on in the year really hurt them significantly in the beginning. They deserve it. I would say that the Bulls definitely deserve it for what it's worth. And then the only other team that I think is deserving of it within that space is probably Portland. I'm just being honest. I think even your Raptors kind of sold after a while. They were in this mix too, and then they got in the train of like all of a sudden doing some wacky stuff.
But that didn't matter. We still won.
Okay, TV, but it's one thing. This is where you got to look at it. Is it more diabolical that they did it and it didn't work, or diabolical that they did it?
Well, here's my thing is like we still played our guys like most of this year. Like quickly again had a bad injury, but like Scotty is gonna reach 65 games. Barrett's gonna be over 60 games. Like these guys like had nagging injuries and they still played a good chunk of the season.
But I would say even if let's say even if the Toronto Raptors are included in this list I'm listing off, right? That's still only 5 out of 14 teams that even really deserve the number 1 overall pick, especially in this given draft class that is top heavy, leaning towards mainly the top 3.
Yeah, for sure. I like this new this range just because it makes people think twice. Because like the reason why people like more than anything want to have like top 5 odds in this draft is because it guarantees them their floor. So they like, okay, at the highest you can get the number 1 pick, but the lowest you can get is number 5, 6, 7, whatever. This, if you even have the smallest chance of getting the number 14th pick, that's going to scare teams. Yeah. And so like, yes, you're going to have the bad being the bad, but at least there's like, gives them a back in their mind like, oh, even if we're bad, we can drop like 12 spots. Now that's very unlikely going to happen. Right. But it gives them the chance. So I wouldn't mind this. Would this change too much though? I don't know. But I just because like the percentages still stay the same. But I like this idea. Jay, the final one though. No repeat winners. And this is the one I feel like more people are starting to talk about now. Is if you've won a draft, you cannot win the next one after.
I think that's so tricky because now you have to determine people's intentions. Because if your team is that bad,
if you win the number 1 safety, since the Hawks won it last year, they can't win it again this year. You know what I mean? Like they can't do it again. They can't.
But if you're that bad, or you're within that mix to need a blue chip talent, why should you now be punished because multiple seasons didn't work out?
I know what you mean.
Atlanta is a great example because in their situation, I think we would consider them as a legitimate top 6 to 7 team in the Eastern Conference when it's fully healthy. I think they're a team that we would consider as being feasible and dangerous in an Eastern Conference setting if Jalen Johnson were healthy, if they still had DeAndre Hunter, right? But things didn't go as planned, and now here they are. Yes, they're still 7th, which is the interesting part. But, that's more catered towards their circumstances on the floor than it really is they're just that bad of a team. So, back-to-back years being in the top 5 mix, is it their fault or is it just the circumstance of how the season went?
Yeah, but I mean, the Hawks are good enough to firstly they looked into it last year. They were the 11th odd. So them true. Was more of an anomaly more than anything. So this year, even if they do lose both playing games and make it in, it's gonna be highly unlikely that they're gonna win it again. That would be some crazy ass odds if they're top 12, top 11 odds and they make it number 1 both times. Super, super lucky. Yeah. It's more for the teams who are okay, we're gonna keep trying and wait for the number 1 pick. And then you're well, you have years where you could be at least we can try and build a confident team, but you're just keep holding out, waiting for that that next generational talent. to a certain extent, like right now, like I mean, like the 76ers did it for years, and they got two like franchise players, and they effed it up. Like, I mean, like I don't mind this idea, but also I think like we don't get really repeat winners anyway, so it's kind of like is it really gonna change much?
Yeah, I think obviously that goes back to more like, again, I referenced it earlier, but like the Sam Hickey days with the Philadelphia 76ers. But like you said, the over the last 5 or so years, similar to the fact that we haven't had repeat champions, we haven't had repeat first overall pick selectors either. So it's kind of one of those things that's like a moot point. Like it takes into account that same group of teams has been bad over the last couple of seasons, but neither of them, none of these groups have necessarily thrived from the circumstances in
Yeah,
a way that's created any kind of real advantage for them.
yeah. But yeah, no, those are like literally the three solutions. Do we say this is easy? No, this is gonna be a. There's no like easy decision into trying to do into trying to fix the tagging problem. It's just that it's like, as you can see, Jay, when you especially when I mean, like I don't know how it's gonna look like for our Bulls Raptors game tonight on the date of recording, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Like this is an important quote unquote tank game for the Raptors. Are they gonna be resting guys? Actually, you know what? Pirtle and Quickly are playing with Scotty, so I think it's still going to be kind of competitive. But um, it's going to be like for a lot of these teams, like man, this is a game. Like we don't want to be in situations like man, we need to lose this game. We can't be like doing that. We don't want to be like having that sort of mentality. So let us know what you guys think down below. Like these are some like definitely some things I've been hearing around, especially like social media and stuff. But again, there's no perfect solution. But if you guys think there's like a different way they should do it, let us know in the comment section down below. Jay, it is time for the final segment of the show, and it is at the buzzer. It's the segment where, before we end the episode, if we wanted to throw something in, something that we really want to like speak our mind on, any sort of topic that you wanted to bring up, this is the time to do so. Jay, I'm gonna throw it over to you. What is one topic that you are that you want to end the episode on?
So obviously you gave your thoughts on it via social media when it happened. By the way, shout out to you. I saw your video drop literally at the same time that the score gave me the notification. So you were low-key my Woj, if I'm keeping it a buck 50 with you when it happened. But I never really gave my thoughts on the Taylor Jenkins firing, so I just was gonna kind of shoot that one off like very
Yeah,
like briefly. And it's just that I think a lot of people were shocked by the timing of it. And obviously, the actual timing itself is the more shocking element of the news. But I think the thing that people need to understand when it comes to his firing in particular was that this team did need a change of scenery to a certain extent. This is a team that's been building a certain type of way for a very long time and not seen any real change within the success that they've had. One of the two biggest things that they've always had issues with over the last 2 seasons is beating high level teams. In particular, this year, I believe in the new year, 2025 specifically. So post, past the halfway mark, basically, they're like they have a below. I think I have a below 500 record against like teams that we consider as like contenders, right?
mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is that I think Taylor Jenkins' philosophy around player development became so ingrained within their roster building
Yeah,
that it actually made it where they like were hesitant to pull the trigger on players that would have made them better sooner. It kind of felt like, remember when the Boston Celtics were going year after year where they were in conversation, Anthony
yeah,
Davis, Paul George, Jimmy
yeah,
Butler, Kevin Durant, and it just seemed like they were always in conversation because they had the treasure trove to be able to go after those guys, but they were so let's build up from the roots within that they
yeah.
kind of got in their own way of getting better.
Yes,
The Memphis Grizzlies are kind of doing the same thing. And if you notice, it took for Brad Stevens to get out of the way, them make this move to go get a Kristaps Porzingis, to go get a Drew Holiday, to then put them over the top. The Memphis Grizzlies kind of feel like they're in a very similar situation. And I think they're the team that needs a more open mind and needs to understand that their window with Ja Morant is much more finite than I think they're giving it credit. And I
yeah,
think the fact that Ja Morant, we talked about this earlier on in the season, the fact that Ja Morant was even considered as a player potentially on the trade block goes to show you that
yeah,
I think even they understand that this is a window that you cannot maximize simply by relying on a 13-man depth roster. Like, yes, depth has become much more important in the league than in this version of the NBA, with the second apron being so impactful and everything the way it is. Yes, depth has become much, much more important in this version of the NBA than years past. But you also don't need to be 13 deep where you also are not sure what your main 8-man rotation is on a night-to-night basis. And that's one of those things that Taylor Jenkins kind of made a tricky element of this team, is he was almost so good at player development that you didn't have a real understanding of who your core guys are versus who are the guys that you need to move off of in order to truly build a championship contender. That's a double-edged sword for him because his strength became his weakness.
Yeah.
But I think it's also one of those things that if you take timing out of it and you just look at the productivity, yes, he was an elite level coach in terms of winning regular season games. But when you look at the timeline of how much time the Memphis Grizzlies may or may not have left within a quote unquote championship window, he might be the kind of coach that keeps you open for the regular season, but always makes you wonder how good they can be when it comes to play for the chip.
Yeah, no, for sure I know what you mean. I mean, like, for me more than anything, and you saw it in my reaction, it's the timing. It's with like 9 games left in the regular season. You just don't see this move happening, especially with a great coach like Taylor Jenkins, someone who was in like top 3, like coach of the year voting, like 2 out of the last 3 years, not including last year, of course. But he was like getting the most out of a injury riddled like Memphis Grizzly team. Even this year, like, I know Ja Morant hasn't been the number one guy, and he hasn't been like showing his productivity as much as like years past. But I thought that was more to do with like his injury like issues and his injury history more than like Taylor Jenkins' system overall. Because like we've seen in like the Taylor Jenkins system, this man thrived with like a 27, 28 points per game, like 9 assists. Like we've seen like the best of Ja Morant in a Taylor Jenkins system, and it works. But I know what like I understand like where you're coming from. And Jay, what's one of our favorite words on this podcast? Consolidation.
Yeah.
Consolidate. Like we love the depth. We love having like teams that are like 10, 11 deep. But when it comes to being real title contenders, I mean, we've been asking the Grizzlies to freaking go for like a wing for years. Like trying to turn like some of these like really good role players into like a good small forward option. We had DeAndre Hunter on the market, Cam Johnson on the market. And if it's a case where Taylor Jenkins was just too attached to the 11th and 12th guys on the roster, I see what you mean. I just feel like this is more of an off-season duty, more like an off-season decision, more than, you know what, we're 9 games away from the season. This is what's going to turn our season around. I know they were on a 4-game losing streak, but I feel like just the timing was really bad. But I do understand where like a discussion needed to be had. There definitely did be a discussion. It's just, the timing was just crazy.
I 100% agree with what you're saying. For me, I agree that the timing is the only outlier for me. Like when I look at this firing, the only thing that stands out to me is when they chose to do it, not necessarily that they chose to do it. You got to remember, TV, we were even talking about a season ago at that last trade deadline. The Memphis Grizzlies were a team we kept bringing up for OG Anunoby once upon a time.
Yes. Yeah.
So this is a thing that has reoccurred even this season. Kevin Durant, Jimmy Butler came up. Cam Johnson came up. Like you said before, DeAndre Hunter was a name that came up. Like, we have constantly penciled in the ideology of them going after a high-level wing to put in between Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. for a long time, paired with the fact that they still have Desmond Bane as a legitimate third option right now. And they have the wherewithal to do it. Santi Aldama has improved as a player. Scottie Pippen Jr. has become one of the best backup point guards in the league.
Yeah.
Over the course of the last, season and a half. I think this is one of those things where I look at their situation and I think if the timing wasn't so controversial, I think Grizzlies fans would tell you a change was needed. I think the timing aspect of it is the only thing that makes it so discombobulating. And so I think that's one of those things where, yes, you look at this and you say consolidation is something that they seem to struggle with. I would also tell you there's another word that we favor on this podcast, TV. It's called competency.
Yeah.
And you wonder if this erratic move out of what feels like emotion is one that might end up hurting them in the long run.
Yeah.
We saw once upon a time with the Milwaukee Bucks before Doc Rivers kind of got things afloat. Firing Mike Budenholzer out of what could have been considered emotion, then put them in a situation where they had Adrian Griffin And even though he had a very good record during the regular season in his tenure, it clearly did not work and clearly did not last. And some would say that at the moment, the Bucks might have even been regretting the fact of letting Bud go, given the way things had skewed, right?
Yes.
So the idea of acting with emotion made that situation that makes this situation with Memphis feel very like incompetent, which is odd for a team like Memphis that outside of their lack of trade moving, they have been a very respectable like organization for the better part of really the last decade plus, even dating back to their grit and grind years.
Yeah, no, it's weird coming from the Memphis Grizzlies. But I mean, it's the same thing we said about the Dallas Mavericks. It was weird coming from the Dallas Mavericks that they traded Luka. So maybe something is off with the season this year. Who knows? But at the same time, yeah, it's just definitely a weird decision. Jay, I will say though, he's gonna be one of those like names on like the coaching, like on the coaching market that there's gonna be a lot of young teams that are gonna be trying to go after him. And if there's one team I want to see him on, if the Portland Trailblazers decide to let go of Chauncey Billups, I think he would be the perfect fit over there in Portland. Like, with him and those young guys, we've seen the most he can get, like what he could do with like a depleted Grizzlies team. He could still get some wins out of them. I think he's the type of coach to take this Trailblazers team to the next level. And they're like getting there slowly but surely, but I think like he can get the most out of it.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely a good option. I think that the interesting part about the league right now is there's not too many vacancies that make you wonder. Obviously, Sacramento was in limbo, to a certain extent, um, with their situation, but I don't necessarily know if Mike Budenholzer comes in and steps over Doug Christie. So that's a tricky one. But outside of that, it gets a little weird because Washington is in a transitional period. The Hornets obviously already set the way they are. Philly, they have to ask themselves how they feel right now about Nick Nurse. Obviously, I think the Nets are in a very perfect position when it comes to their coaching situation. Um, you guys with the Raptors, I think, are pretty set in your ways at the moment as it is. The Bulls, I think they're not letting Billy Donovan go, especially with the fact that they've been playing so well towards the back end of the season. The Spurs are interesting, but that depends on the Greg Popovich scenario, especially given that Mike Budenholzer is a Greg Popovich disciple. That could be a very interesting spot for him. The Jazz are already pretty locked in. It's really, to me, it's only between mainly the Pelicans, the Trailblazers, and then maybe the Spurs if their vacancy becomes real with Greg Popovich having to make a good decision. But other than that, I mean,
a lot of teams are locked in. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, there's not a lot of room for him to move if you're talking about him becoming a head coach for a team. I could easily see him joining the San Antonio Spurs staff in the offseason, though. I'm not necessarily predicting it, but I would say don't sleep if Mike Budenholzer ends up becoming like an assistant coach for the San Antonio Spurs over the offseason and kind of gets himself grandfathered into taking maybe that next step behind Greg Popovich and in that Spurs organization.
Yeah, for sure. But let us know what you guys think about this whole chicken situation. Where do you think his next place is going to be at? We want to hear your thoughts down below. Jay, another topic I want to bring in here. I know we mentioned this a little bit going into this episode, and this has to do with actually women's college basketball because the number 2 prospect going into this year's draft, Olivia Miles, has decided to forego the whole draft process and is now entering the transfer portal. Not even returning to Notre Dame, Jay. He's entering the transfer portal for one more year of college basketball, which is kind of crazy, knowing that she had a chance to be there. She looked like he was gonna be. I mean, you said it too. Like maybe the chance of being number 1 over Paige Beckers. That's how good Olivia Miles has been. Like, what does this have to say about the WNBA in general? And do you think this was the right decision?
So I'm not gonna lie, I thought this was a really surprising circumstance because to me, like you said, like the fact that she was projected number 2 overall, it just really raises the bar for what the WNBA has to be able to provide in order to get women to want to genuinely commit to the idea of going pro now, because there's another avenue that wasn't there before. Olivia Miles is one of the best players in the country and has been for a couple seasons now, mind you. this is a situation where the WNBA is in a very weird spot because despite the fact that their draft class this upcoming year is still going to be very solid. Don't get me wrong, when April 12th comes around, you're going to hear some very solid names come up.
Yes.
Paige Beckers is still a very solid player. Sidonia Prince for
Yeah.
TCU is a really good player, right? They have good prospects still in the waiting, but Olivia Miles being off the list, paired with the fact that Lauren Betts for UCLA, a player who's going to be in the Final Four,
Yeah.
right, is not going to be in this mix. It really depletes not only the draft class, but it hurts the overall product of the WNBA when these top level players have the opportunity to come to your league and they're foregoing another season of possibly being a pro in order to play college basketball. And there's no environment like college basketball, men's or women's. I'll just say that
Yes.
for what it is. It's a completely different vibe from in terms of that versus professional basketball when you're talking about being able to enjoy the game, right?
Yes.
But the money aspect has changed the narrative in such a crazy way. But I never thought it would get to the point where we're looking at players who are projected top 5. And this is 2 of them now.
Yeah.
Projected top 5 to forego an opportunity to go pro in order to return back to college. It's a real gut punch to the WNBA, but I think it also further pushes the point that Nafisa Collier was making when she made her appearance on First Take, which is that their renegotiation of the CBA in October is going to just become so much more pivotal. And obviously that doesn't impact the incoming rookie class because they'll already be brought onto their teams via draft by this point, given the fact that they're going to be
I think they'll
drafted.
be done by the time they can agree to the new CBA comes into effect, which is like after October, right? Yeah.
The regular season, you're saying? For
Yeah,
them?
I mean, like even like the finals like finishes like I guess like I guess like the most of the like even like half the playoffs are gonna be done by like the time October comes around, right?
I believe with the way that the season is extended now for the
Yeah.
regular season, it would be pretty deep into the regular season
Yeah,
by
deep.
that
Okay,
point.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, for sure, yeah.
So that's the thing that makes it tricky is because this given draft class is not going to be able to benefit. And I think that's part of it is some of these top level players are making business decisions around the fact that this CBA is going to be so influential and they want a piece of the pie and deservedly so.
Yeah.
Right. So
Especially with the whole NIL situation going on in college right now. Like, I think who was it on the podcast? I think it was like it might have been Lisa Leslie. I think it might have been Lisa Leslie, where she's like, if you had someone like have the chance to go back one more year of college and come to WNBA, what would you tell them? She said immediately, like, I'm telling them to go back to college. Like that, like there's just like more to be had there, especially now with the whole like NIL deals and everything. So I mean, like Paige at this point didn't have any choice, and she's now more than ever clearly the number 1 pick in this year's draft. But I think, like, yeah, the season going forward, and like you mentioned about this whole CBA, they have to nail this because, like,
Yes.
Angel Reese said something about it. Even Gabby Williams, remember, like the press conference she had at the end of the season was saying, like, I might be better off just playing in Europe because they're gonna give like have better contracts over there. So they really need to do this, especially like we talk about capitalizing on the popularity. We have
Yes.
never talked about the WNBA more than we have right here, right now. This is game changing, and this is this could be like huge in terms of being able to retain players staying in their league and not having them to go overseas. Shout out to Nika Mule. Hopefully her recovery is gonna go great because she got freaking injured in her first game as overseas. So like all that type of stuff. Like that's why this is so important to make sure that like you make sure that you have people like wanting to come to your league, even if it means like foregoing a year of college or it means like people like wanting to play overseas. So again, this is like a huge decision. And it's gonna be interesting to see because next year's draft class might start to get a bit more stacked.
Yeah, next year's draft class just got much more interesting, and I think the biggest thing too is you hit it on the head, man. This CBA they have to nail because you also have to listen to your superstars, right? What is more indicative of the fact that the WNBA needs to make a change than 2 of your biggest stars developing their own league as an offseason choice?
Yeah.
Right? Like that's something that should, and with the backing that Unrivaled got, shout out to Nafisa Collier and Brianna Stewart with putting that together, with the backing that they were able to get financially from companies, NBA players, other
ESPN broadcasting it. Yeah.
yeah, other possibility. Like I mean, they were locked in with HBO Max
Yes.
this year from a viewership standpoint, right? That's TV. We're talking TV rights now.
Yeah.
If your players are able to develop that on their own, and you see that the NBA is already having conversations around the idea of players talking about another league, an extension of the NBA, right?
Yes.
This is only going to further dilute the product if the product at the tippity top doesn't make the proper adjustments to keep them at number one. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for
So
sure.
like this is one of those situations where like there's some real things that need to be done. There's some real things that need to be done. And I hope that they get handled in this upcoming CBA because it's going to be very important to see this league grow while the capitalization of the hype around this league is at its apex. Because this, like you said, TV, I've loved the WNBA for years, but I can definitely say from a mainstream media perspective, there has never been more WNBA media produced or consumed than right now.
Yeah, no, 100%. And we just want to keep to see this game grow. We want to see, especially with like the Toronto Temple coming in next year. That's also a good start. The Portland team coming the year after. This game is just continuing to grow. That's why like every decision in terms of like marketing, trying to make sure like extending the season, like everything is going to be put under a microscope because everyone's paying attention now. People are paying attention, and you want to make sure that you want to retain the fans that you brought in, and also like just like continue to grow this league and like have new fans kind of come on board. So yeah, the whole CBA is huge. Let us know your thoughts down below on it and this whole situation. Jay, final topic before we end the show. I did want to like just throw this in here because this was a major talking point. The whole brawl with the Pistons and Timberwolves, firstly, like insane scene, like those like different camera angles where you have freaking Isaiah Stewart freaking basically choking. I think it was like Dante DiVincenzo along the baseline, going over the fans. By the way, and like they finally released all of the suspension and stuff. Ron Holland, Marcus Sasser, DiVincenzo, and Naz Reid all getting a 1-game suspension, and Isaiah Stewart getting 2 games. Stewart's penalty quoted in this release based in part on his repeated history of unsportsmanlike conducts. So yeah, they definitely kept into mind all the stuff that Isaiah Stewart was involved with in the past.
Yeah.
Jay, quick thoughts on this, and then I mean, actually, before I throw it over to you, here's my situation with it because like we've seen like a lot of these like fights break out. We've seen Draymond Green get suspended like indefinitely, certain amount of games. We've seen like Ibaka and Joel Embiid wasn't get multiple games after swinging on the court at each other. My issue with this, and I think this is like dating back, and I think I had this thought in mind because of the whole Mouse in the Palace from like 20 years ago. When fans get involved, and you're getting this close to the paying customers of your of these games, do they look from it from a different lens? Because I saw a situation where a kid got kind of trapped underneath. He didn't get like sort of injured or anything, but he was definitely scared. The Timberwolves gave him a free Naz Reid signed jersey, this and that, but it became like just super close to like where it could get dangerous, where you're involving the wrong people, the guys who are paying to watch your games. So today, I'm just gonna throw it over to you, and then we can have a quick convo on it. But like, should there be a different lens when you get like the action spilling out to like near the fans area? Because I mentioned to you before the pod, what if certain lawsuits come out? What if like certain things get sued for like the experience? Like, oh, I didn't pay to get these guys like fighting on my lap, this and that. Like, it can get into very messy situations. I just want to hear your thoughts on it.
I mean, me personally, like I told you before we actually started recording, the biggest reason why I wasn't necessarily sure what my thoughts on this were actually started more within a basketball context of just the fact that I wasn't sure what kind of penalty you give down to 2 teams who are both playoff bound and the regular season being so close to being over. So it's something that if you were to give them a true suspension, it either would not necessarily hurt their regular season success, or it's something that would have to spill into next season, which is kind of a weird thing to have to gauge given the circumstance.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing, and you mentioned it beforehand, is at the end of the day, when the paying customer gets involved, you're now hurting the business side of the NBA
Yeah.
more so than you're hurting the product on the floor, right? The idea of guys going at each other aggressive, you want to see that. You want to see high level basketball because you want to see guys trying, especially this late in the regular season, to see some tension actually would be considered a positive thing because you'd at least see that guys are still trying to play at a high level. The problem becomes when it spills out and it becomes a little bit more 3D, right? Because at the end of the day, like you said, That's not what my ticket says is involved in it. Nobody said nobody said my NBA game comes with a WWE show attached to it, right? So that's one of those things where now you're put in a position where you mentioned it beforehand. Things like lawsuits and things of that nature are taken into consideration. The tricky part for this, and the reason why I feel like it's so hard to really fight against the concept of them only giving 2-game suspensions to the guys who did get any kind of real disciplinary action is, again, in what context do you hand out any version of real disciplinary action, given the fact that there's no real implications you can make on it unless you're planning on making sure that these guys are missing for a portion of their playoff series, which I think that's a tough pill to swallow, and I also think that's a hard part of history to potentially be on as a commissioner or anybody that has to make that kind of decision to potentially affect your playoff productivity, right? Your playoff ratings, your
Yeah.
playoff enjoyment, because guys are missing from the postseason due to a scuffle in the last 2 weeks of the regular season. Like that's a tough bottom line to come beyond of the business acumen of the paying customer, right, in an active setting versus what the postseason productivity is from a revenue perspective. You're put between essentially a rock and a hard place. And
Yeah.
so I think the timing of this makes it so difficult because there's no proper punishment you can give that doesn't hurt your bottom line.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's especially like interesting because like I mean we've seen like what happens when they go into crowds. We've seen Malice at the Palace. We've seen like 60 game, 40 something game like suspensions handed out. That basically you gotta remember this like whole Malice at the Palace thing basically prevented the Pacers from competing for a championship because they were one of the
Exactly.
top teams in the league at the time, and then they were missing like Ron Artest, Steven Jackson, who were key members of their roster throughout the season. But again, that's a whole different scenario. This is freaking Ron Artest freaking attacking a fan. This is like a whole different scenario. It is a whole different like conversation. It's just more like it's on the court. There's some control that we can have over that. It's when you involve security guards trying to protect the people in the stands. If there's like, again, like a random casualty happening, then like what's the conversation around that? I guess we'll like get into it like when like if it ever does happen. We hope it doesn't happen. But
Yeah.
man, just seeing some of those pictures, seeing the camera angles where fans were like super duper close to the action, I was just thinking in my head, I'm like, yo, if these like players like end up like swinging on any of these like average citizens, Jay, I'm talking about people like you and me. If we were in that situation, yo, like you wouldn't tell me that we would have had like some sort of injury.
It could have been bad. I'm not gonna sit
Could
here
have
and
been.
act like it wasn't gonna be wicked. At the end of the day, the situation was not good, and the way that it spilled out obviously is going to be something that has to be further discussed. Again, I think the biggest thing is that they were put in a position specifically because this is 2 playoff teams from different conferences.
Yeah.
That now, if you lay down any type of specific punishment that may leak into the postseason, you are now hurting a different version of your bottom line. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, there's 2 sides to the story. And there's the business acumen side of it, and there's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the NBA fell in between a rock and a hard place of being able to make a decision within that both solves their problem effectively, right, to deter
Yeah.
this happening in future situations, while also having to consider the fact that like the Detroit Pistons are making the playoffs for the first time in 8 bajillion years, and if you're missing 3 or 4 players that were heavy contributors to them making the postseason, that's also going to hurt their productivity when the actual series starts. Same thing goes for the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are obviously a big storyline for how will they produce in their first postseason without Karl Anthony Towns, right?
Yeah.
So there's these separate agendas at play that also contribute. I think there would have been a much bigger slap on the back of the head if this was around game 45 instead of game 75. Does that make sense?
Right.
You
Exactly.
see what
Yeah.
I mean?
I get. I know what you mean. If it was like maybe like earlier on in the season, like game 30, then
Yeah.
maybe we could have seen like a 5 to 10 game suspension. But again, no one did get hurt. Fortunately, like I said, some kid like freaking got like caught in the middle of everything, and like the Timberwolves just awarded him with a Nas Reed jersey. But man, if like say if like freaking like Isaiah Stewart accidentally like grabbed a kid and something like that, like then that would be like a whole different situation. But I mean, I guess we'll see what happens if it ever does get to that point. But I'm just saying, like, we got awfully close. We got awfully close to it. But yeah, let us know what you guys think down below. Do you think the suspensions were valid? I know people were saying, DiVincenzo should have had the most ones since he's the one he started it. But like I mentioned, like Isaiah Stewart has a history of this, and if we're gonna hold Draymond Green to that sort of caliber, then we have to do something with Isaiah Stewart because man wants to be in the middle of every single scuffle that happens in Detroit when that involves the Detroit Pistons. So yeah, let us know what you guys think down below. But yeah, Jay, another end of an episode. Thank you guys for watching. It was a great talking about the All NBA. We got to talk about like women's college basketball too. Been a great episode. What do you have to tell these beautiful people before we sign out?
So we're about 10 days away as of recording this from the NBA regular season wrapping up, which is huge because obviously postseason is where we get into our real mode. But I also have to shout out the WNBA again because we had that conversation about Olivia Miles, but it's going to permeate throughout the postseason as well because the WNBA draft is in a week and a half as well. So you can definitely expect more WNBA topics, I think, throughout this time frame during the playoffs because there's going to be some lull days, right? The first round is always action-packed because there's so many teams competing on a night-to-night basis and everything's happening so fast. The first round goes by really quickly. Really quickly. Ironically, it's the longest of all the series, but it goes by the fastest, or at least it feels like it. But in that time frame during the postseason, as we ramp up towards the NBA Finals and obviously the start to the WNBA season, you can expect a lot more diversity, I believe, on the podcast. And I would also say I think something to look out for is a lot more diversity on the social media platform, specifically in terms of reacting to news related to the WNBA and things of that nature. We obviously are going to be super locked in on the game-to-game stuff for the NBA playoffs. You can expect to see anywhere between 4 to 5 videos a night, depending on how many games are played. So definitely keep up with the social media channels because we plan on covering every game of every series. We did it last year and we had an absolute ball doing it on a night-to-night basis. So I'm looking forward to that once again. But also expect a lot more a lot more WNBA content as well, just because it's something that we still have kind of only dabbled in, and I think we have the real capability of touching on it a lot more than we have. And with this season being our first real locked in season of the WNBA coming up, I think we're more excited than ever to really give it our full attention and energy.
100%. And bro, the WNBA draft is right around the corner, so conversation is going to be held about that. Even though we talked about a couple of ladies dropping out of the draft, but it's still going to be something that we're going to have to talk about. So be on the lookout for that pretty soon. It's gonna be a nice couple of weeks, especially like I said. Next week we got the NBA award show, and then we're gonna go fully into playoff mode. So it should be pretty dope. But yeah, thank you guys for all your support. Continue to support the Hit Your Freedoms podcast too. All the links below. Jay and I will be back next week for the NBA awards episode, so that should be a good one. But yeah, hopefully all of you have a fantastic day. This is TV. This is Jay. We're signing out. Peace.